We'll do a quick Q&A as well. We'll get started on the Q&A while he sets that up for the testing. So does anyone have any questions that we can answer? That part's over. Over here.
I was wondering, how would you start looking into modding? Like, how would you learn on websites or books?
What kind of modding are you looking to get into? The client side or the server side, or a bit of both? Just getting started?
Yeah, a bit of both.
Okay, the best thing you can do is join up to one of the forums, either Forge, Spigot, Bucket, and start looking at code, essentially. Start to understand what each thing means and does. There's a couple of books on Java, but if you grasp the basics, you can pretty much just dive in at the deep end. Do you like that?
If you're actually looking for introductory coverage of things like Java, some of the helper sites are actually really good to kind of point in the right direction. Things like about.com actually has like entire sections on how to get started in development as a whole, and they cover like variety of languages, like Java's one of them. There are actually quite a few sites if you Google them. Sort of like just Google something simple like Learn Java or Learning Java. There are several sites out there dedicated to actually starting you from scratch onwards. Once you understand the general gist of the language, there are GitHub repositories by, depending on whether it's Bucket or Forge you're going for, like CPW has Iron Chests mod is up on GitHub. Project Red, which is a dive in the deep end, has a GitHub repository. Do you? Yeah, so Flan mod is on a GitHub repository. There's so many resources out there that you can actually access to have a look and see how existing mods have done it. So you get plenty of actual proof of concept there. Once you understand them, it makes it a lot easier to actually start on your own once you sort of like get solid content to work on.
I've just spotted time, so we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. So if you've got a really awesome question, put 2 hands up. And if you've got an alright question, put 1 hand up. So we'll go through the questions. 1 hand.
Is making mods easy?
I'd say so, yeah. I mean, as you saw there, the sitting on stairs one, it's all about thinking of things you can do with what you've already got before you try and create something new. It's the simplest way you can get started with it.
Hi. What is it that got you into modding, and how did you start coding? What was it that got you into that?
I started playing Minecraft. I started running my own server. I started noticing that the plugins that other people were making just weren't good enough for me. So I started trying to make my own, and that's pretty much what got me into it. I got fed up with other people and waiting for them to update things, so I learned to update it myself.
Well, I just started playing Minecraft and then playing with mods, and then I thought, well, I want to make my own things. I actually started off thinking I want to make a space mod. That would be really cool. So I thought that's quite complicated. So I just started with a flying bagel, the first plane, and it just took off from there. And yes. And yeah, I never actually got onto the space mod, but made lots of other mods on the way.
So this is what happens if you don't forward Ajax from version. But it happens to us all the time.
I mean, the thing that I would probably change here is I would spawn the minecart 1 block above the stairs, rather than in the stairs, which is what's happened here. So I think we're going to make that change just now. which is a very simple change using the location object. You would just add 010, which is XYZ, and that will spawn above it, and then you'll actually be able to see. So, other questions?
Yeah, right here.
Right here.
How do you know, like, how to modify the packets that the server sends to the client to the net.minecraft.server?
There's a really great site called wiki.vg, which I use for reference all the time when I'm stuck.
The network packet system is significantly more complex to actually look into and use compared to like the bucket system, from what I can see. Not technically harder, just it's more involved because Forge deals with both client and server side. But your code kind of sits on both. It's why Forge coding can be technically more challenging. You're right, one jar file, basically one mod file, and the server has that and the client has it both at the same time. So you have to know which side you're on, talk to the other side, and be able to send the right things the right way. So it's difficult, but as Bode said, there are reference sites which kind of list all the contents of the different packets, and in as detailed as possible what they all do. So it's anytime we're looking at something, unless it's something we're intimately involved in, it's the go to the reference site. It's pretty much covers just about any language and anything you're doing. Is if you're learning something new, it goes to a reference site or go to a reference book.
Yep, I mean, there's no way that I can personally remember everything. I always have, I mean, at home I've got a 3-screen setup so that I can have Minecraft in one, the code window in another, and then Google, so I can look up things I forget. Because I forget things all the time. So if you look up things and that's how you get started, you shouldn't feel ashamed for that because everyone does that. it's exactly how it works.
I'll freely admit I avoid as much as possible anything that deals with the packet system because it's me. It's the sort of thing where you might have seen in like some like people live streaming this stuff. Hi.
We got it working.
Hello. Oh, wait, no.
So there you go.
No.
You can now sit on the
Oh,
stairs.
no, it doesn't want to wave at me. It wants to punch me in the head. Okay.
Does that answer your question, or did you want to know more about like the new packet systems and everything that's going on? Okay, a bit more. The new packet system that's in 1.7 as opposed to 1.6 splits packets out into like server and client. So you can do the same thing really, it just lets you streamline what you're doing a bit, because if you're looking up what packet do I send from the server to the client, you can now just look at server to client packets rather than having to search through the whole list. I mean, the main thing I use them for is the particle effect system, which really doesn't have a vanilla implementation until very recently. And that's just to do cool effects around players like auras and stuff. What are you doing?
I have to say that new system, the splitting between server and client, is fantastic. It's something that's been needed to be done for a lot more versions before now.
Yeah, they've really started to clean up the system. I'm
Yes.
really looking forward to the plugin API, which is why Bucket and Forge are good things to get into rather than base class modding, which is another way to mod, which isn't really recommended. Exactly. Because if you're learning to do Bucket or Forge, then you're preparing yourself for when the mod API comes out, and you're going to be 100% ready for that. So, next questions.
Hiya. Quick question. We got started with the Raspberry Pi API for Minecraft and using Python as an intro into the world. What do you think? What do you think? When I say Python, what do you think? Should we just dive in straight into Java, or should we spend a couple of years down that road?
I mean, if you want to get started right away doing stuff in Minecraft right now, there's no reason that you can't just get straight into Java. It's pretty much the same deal. Constructors, objects, methods. There's, apart from syntax, very little difference between the two. So, if you want to get started straight away rather than Python, then there's nothing stopping you. On the Bucket website, there's a central repository for all plugins listed, and also there's utilities that people have written. I've written a few, such as like things to make configs easier, some firework stuff that I could. And there's like people will post them and just be like, just put credit in your source code somewhere, and you're fine to do whatever. It's quite an open source community, the Bucket one.
Forge site. Due to the steps FTP's been taking lately, at least, you're probably going to see an awful lot more mods showing up in CurseForge, because it's becoming a more readily accessible like central repository for Forge-based mods. You find an awful lot of people now with stuff like up there, with Curse having their Curse client, which allows you to sort of like grab and put things into the right place for the Minecraft client. Get a lot easier pursuit, because that's something that's happening at the moment into the future. There's been tweets from MTV and such about it. They're kind of like definitely working together on this towards player advantage. At the moment, Minecraftforum.com is like a massive forum for Minecraft stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
there are an awful lot of people who have mods who frequent that, just looking for mods on that site, and almost all of them, if they're a decent post, will actually have instructions as to how to install the mod, etc. With Forge, it's actually reasonably straightforward. Putting the mods in the right folder, pretty much good.
I mean, that's the beauty of a plugin system, is it's all pretty straightforward once you've got the code compiled.
And there are plenty of YouTube videos out there doing a how-to, as in these are the steps you take to do stuff. No. So things are pretty straightforward.
Hi there. With Minecraft players soon being able to change their usernames, how much of an impact will the plugin switching from usernames to unique player IDs be impacted? And also, how would you go about changing everything and making it work?
Very good question, and both of us have just done this on quite considerable scale. Depending on the plugin activity and the author of the plugin, the main thing you need to do is change all references to player names to references to the UUID string. They're both strings. I mean, if you consider a name as like an arbitrary concept that refers to a player, then all that is the name is no longer something you can use to refer to a player when they're offline. You have to use the UUID as that concept. And how that's going to affect things. If you've got plugins that are inactive, Factions I know is one that's not very frequently updated, especially the old version. But I know that there's a couple of people who've gone in and updated it to UUID. You would check the Spigot forums for Factions and things like that. And if you've got favorite plugins you want updated but you can't quite do it yourself, you could post on one of the forums, say, I've done this, I tried to do this, could somebody help? And generally they'll at least give you pointers, unless you find a troll, but somebody will help.
And on the Forge side of things, Forge is actually still on 1.7.2, and the changes are, at some point, it's 1.7.7 or something. So it should be coming soon, but you can't update it on Forge mod yet.
Is 0.10 coming soon?
They're already flagging some and showing up some of the demos at one point. So 0.10 is coming soon, trademark. So things are already in the pipeline for stuff. Yeah, they're moving fast now.
They really are. They
yes.
had, I don't know if any of you follow the Minecraft release schedule at all, but there were several versions of different versions released as well. I think there was 2.7s, 3.8s, and a couple of 0.9s as well, and now they're coming up with 0.10, and that was all in the space of a week, so they're really ramping it up to get ready for this big 1.8 update. It's quite cool. This is quite an exciting time to be involved in Minecraft and playing it, because it's about to completely redefine everything.
Especially from a modding's perspective, there's going to be so much more possible because the client's becoming easier to work with. From Foresight, the client's becoming easier to work with, which makes the whole working from
You're good.
working from both sides a lot more interesting. The people are going to be able to do an awful lot more. As far as the name change update for Forge, changes are being done, but Slixmanos is at the moment the mainstay. He's working on both Forge and FML at the same time because CPW stepped back. So he's doing the work of two people on some code that he wasn't intimately involved in writing at the start, so it's a learning process there. You're getting through it really quite quickly, but yeah, doing the job of two people, it's taking a little bit longer. It will get there. It's almost there.
Lee, do you want to talk about what you've sort of been doing to get everything up to date with Buycraft and new UIDs?
So, hello? Yeah. Basically, when with Buycraft, some of you probably know what it is, but when the user tries to donate to a server, they have to enter their username. So for the past 3 years, for when Buycraft's been running, we've been referencing everything to do with the usernames. So now, when 1.8 releases, you'll be able to change your username. So the problem is that when someone donates to a server and they get a rank, for example, if they change their username, there's a chance that they're going to lose it. So we're having to go through about 4 million different usernames and change everything to the new unique user ID system. So it's a good few weeks of work, very stressful, but we're getting there. And to be honest, over all of the big server networks, there's probably been over 30 million. 11? There's probably about 11 million username conversions. So everyone's been pulling their hair out over the last few weeks.
Yeah, down the front again.
In Arena, bro, for the scoreboard, how can you make one of the offline player names blank because it doesn't accept it if you just do 2 speech marks?
Oh, chat colors. If you don't have anything after a chat color, then it doesn't show up.
Okay. I've got another question about the Buycraft thing. Isn't it the permission plugins that have to change to the system and not Buycraft?
It's both sides. So the reason why we're having to change is because, for example, if someone buys a rank which expires, and then they change their username halfway through before it expires, when it actually expires, it won't remove it from their account. That's why we have to do the unique user ID as well.
Never heard of that.
Sorry? Oh, right.
Hello.
Hello. You know some mods use that ID mismatch, so it pops up saying there are ID mismatches. I've come across a few Forge mods that don't actually use that system, so it doesn't pop up saying, oh, there's an ID mismatch. It just loads in and then replaces the item with the item from the other mod. How would you go about implementing that so it actually checks the IDs rather than just whacking it in? Any ideas?
Forge modders?
Was that asking how Forge does it or asking how to do it in Bucket?
No, how to do it so, say if I make a mod myself, so I can actually modify it or get it so it will check for the IDs inside of the config file as opposed to just using the IDs that's already set using the mod.
Right. That's a good one actually.
I thought so, at least.
It's funky because I do that, and it's really hard to describe. Right, when you're going into your initialization event, when you catch the event handler for the initialization, in like the pre-init, when you catch that, it passes in the event things like the path to the suggested configuration file, which I believe is the name of the method. You can use that to basically go, where's my config file be? If you grab that and open up a configuration class with that passed to it, then that will open up a configuration file, automatically start to give you the opportunity to pull properties out of it. When you read in those properties, you can pass it like a suggested ID in case it doesn't exist, and it will set it to that as a default. You then pass that when you're registering your item or your block or stuff like that, and it will try and use that. If that is already used up, it will then fall back to it, just give me an ID number. But we'll pass that back through the ID chain, so you store it in your configuration file. It's tricky, but things like iron chests on GitHub and things like that, there are plenty of mods with Git repositories and such, where it actually shows them doing that. So the best idea is to go look at how somebody else has done it, basically just go, because it's open source code, it's there to be used and learned from, so feel free to do it. But yeah, the configuration class is what we're looking for.
Is this pre 1.7.2 Forge?
Yes.
Okay, because in 1.7.2 there are no longer IDs. Change it.
Yeah, at the moment I'm running mod backups altogether, different mods.
Okay.
And I've been just going through changing the ID mismatches, and there's been some mods I can't use because it just plonks in its own IDs, so I can't use the ID conflict bit. I couldn't talk. I could the ID conflict bit that Forge uses, so I just wanted to know how to implement that. So if I could make my own subcons, then I could avoid problems.
It is a common problem. Also, Flan is correct in that in 1.7.2 it changes because they're moving away from IDs. However, if you provide that mechanism anyway, then when you move from pre-1.7.2 to 1.7.2, if there are any IDs existing in a world that's moving to the next version, it will take them and auto-convert them. But you have to provide the IDs.
In the new version, is it strings that you use? Or what does it use?
Everything's named. Like the previous way that you could define with an ID and set a name for everything, which we'd use for localization and such, that name is what it uses internally to define your block. And when it's saving out to the anchor files for that, it saves out that ID. It's tricky how it does it, but it works.
Good question. Really good question. Right,
if you could change any aspects of the Bucket API to any way you'd like, what would you change and why?
I would move away from YAML, personally. I mean, it does the job, but there are other configuration libraries which are a little bit less finicky. That's pretty much what would you change?
Nothing.
There you go. He thinks it's perfect. Okay. And I think you've got a little thing that you've done over there. Shall we have a wee look at that to close?
So, in the meantime, I'm just looking for a bit of code. So what I did, as soon as the player joins, you get this nice message, welcome to the server. You're watching the Insomnia Festival on the panel, and we're allowed to play with Flan. So what we're doing is we're charging the player experience to Flan. So you can mine, go with other people, and gain experience. So what we're doing, we have a player mode event here. This is how we get the player. If he's flying, and his experience is not 0, we're sending him a message. We're now flying his experience. We're sending his experience with a
Max.
to the experience he has, minus 100. So he's losing some experience, which I'm now flying around and I'm losing experience. But I'm not losing it because the amount of Z too low, but you get that. And as soon as he gains experience again, we're allowed to fly again. It's pretty simple, pretty easy.
There you go. And yeah, as you can see, that's not that many lines of code. You just need to take something that's already there, like the ability to make a player fly, and then do something fun with it. And you can pretty much make your own mods in under 5 minutes.
Big, you can do everything.
Yep, or pigs that turn into TNT then explode. That's all really, really easily possible with a bucket especially. We're kind of timing, I think. Yeah. So thank you very much, fine people, for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Oh, is there
one more?
One more. Yep, we can take it.
The issues that surround faction servers and mini games in terms of hacked clients, why can't we use the code, etc., to stop it?
Two sides of things. One is the easy modability of Java, which is great for making mods. And that's all these hack clients essentially are, is mods which are designed to maliciously affect servers by giving players unfair advantages and such. And without some kind of signing on the client side, which would then ruin some of the modability and change the sort of sandbox thing that we have to work with, there's not really a great deal we can do. Another thing that some games use to check for that is third-party software, like Valve's VAC, which is installed on your computer and checks the game files to see if there's been any bytecode changes and stuff like that. But obviously, without something like that from Mojang, which would really hurt the game in terms of the flexibility and amazing creativity that it allows, there's not a great deal that can be done besides just having an active moderation staff. Boom. So yeah, as I was saying, thank you so much for coming. And we're doing another panel on Sunday, late again, on how to run a server, where we'll be talking more about specifics to do with setting up, picking your plugins, hardware, and the new UID system in more detail. So I hope to see some of you there, and thank you again.
Skeleton, what do you do to you?